Well, hello everyone. This is Data Driven Formula One with Patrick, Henz, and Ganna Pogrebna. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Ganna. Hello, all. And finally, we find time to speak about Gilles Villeneuve. I think one of all times fan favorites, despite the fact that he never had been a world championship. In general speaking, when we speak about the big stars, you always have to think how we do it, because there's a lot of content out there also on YouTube. So how we want to tell the story. And so for this episode, we aligned Gilles Villeneuve with another famous driver, Tazio Nuvolari, somebody about whom we not spoke much about in our episode for a very easy reason. We are data-driven F1, and Nuvolari had his career before Formula One, so in a time before 1950. But nevertheless, there's also a reason for doing this, because he had a similar driving style. And there's one famous quote by Enzo Ferrari, who I think he only said twice. Once related Alberto Ascari in the 1950s, and then more than 20 years later regarding Gilles Villeneuve, comparing him to Tazio Nuvolari, saying, I see a little Nuvolari in you.
Yeah, so but Nuvolari, was it? I just want to ask Patrick, because I honestly don't know the answer to this question. So was Nuvolari like a gold standard driver for Enzo Ferrari? Is that someone that was really like always used as a example of great driving, or was it someone? Or did he have several kind of favorites?
No, he was really the gold standard for Enzo Ferrari. He drove in the beginning against him, and from my interpretation, Tazio Nuvolari was also one of the reasons why Enzo Ferrari stopped being a driver himself. The number one reason is his wife was pregnant and asked him to stop racing. But knowing Enzo Ferrari, I assume it was not this one reason alone, listening to his wife, but understanding that he never could drive on the level of Tazio Nuvolari, and thought, I'm a good driver. He had also victories, but he will never drive like Tazio Nuvolari. But he had the idea, I can be a great team manager. So that's why he focused on being the team manager.
Yeah, I just want to also say to those of you who haven't heard us talk about Enzo Ferrari, Patrick has written how many books? Two books on Enzo Ferrari, or
no,
definitely one. I know of one.
Directly one, yes.
One definitely is on Enzo Ferrari, but there's also generally about managerial practices in Formula One, and so you should check out Patrick's work on this. And we have a special on Enzo Ferrari, so you definitely should watch it. Yeah. And as usual, at this point, I just want to remind everyone to subscribe and hit the bell, so that you motivate us to continue doing this. And again, remind to those of you who don't know what we're doing here, this is essentially a podcast with some extras, and we encourage you to watch this podcast on YouTube. We have some visuals, especially when we discuss the cars, or we discuss some people, and we normally have really great illustrated way of talking about things, but generally we only show you things that we can show you legally. So either we have an open license to them, or we buy a license to show you images. So we never show up like pirated content. So please be mindful that this is an ethical. This is an ethical channel. And welcome to all of you who are with us today.
And no animals harmed.
yes, no animals harm. That's also an important feature. And here's Gilles Villeneuve, if you're watching us on YouTube or Spotify.
Yeah, Gilles Villeneuve, and we will come back to this in this episode. So we have here a Canadian driver, and I'm here with my Canadian shirt. I'm here with my cup from Quebec, the area where he came from, the French part of Canada, quite near Montreal. So this is Gilles Villeneuve, but as promised, we will start a little bit with Tazio Nuvolari. Here you see a photo from him, 1932. And here are some quotes, what other people said about him. The greatest driver of the past, the present, and the future. This was said by Ferdinand Porsche. Although small in stature, he was a giant, something what was said by the five-time champion Juan Manuel Fangio. And then a quote by Enzo Ferrari. Nuvolari was a driver who in any type of car, in any circumstance, on any track, always gave everything and ended up on the whole the best. In contrast to many drivers of yesterday and today, he never started out beaten because of an inferior car. And I think this is what he had together with Gilles Villeneuve. They always drove 100% all the time. So nobody like say Alan Prost or Niki Lauda who drove maybe on 95% if they saw they're winning the race anyway. So Gilles Villeneuve, Tazio Nuvolari, these had been drivers always on the limit and unfortunately sometimes over the limit.
Yeah, and also I think the kind of the important part to mention here is that it's also not so much that the the driving at like 100 or more, 100 or more than 100%, but also to not give up when you're in an inferior car. So this. And this was really, like when we actually spoke about Fangio, I mean, it was kind of similar attitude, right? So even if you are in an inferior car and the odds are against you, you are still concentrating and you're still not giving up. Yeah.
And one reason why, if possible, you should watch us on YouTube or Spotify, because we have some images. We had also one episode only about superstitions. And on the photo, quite nice to see on the neck, he has a little silver turtle, which he got from a friend. And this is what he always had been wearing. Also, he did some replicas, giving them as gifts for friends. Sometimes it was painted on his car. Plane, whatever. So this is really which as his had been his good luck charm all the time, and brought him through the racing, because luckily some in opposite to many drivers of that time, he survived motorsports.
So is it do you know whether that has to do with slow and steady wins the race? Is that like turtle against the rabbit tail?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know the tale, it's obviously the turtle and the rabbit were competing, and so this is obviously ancient tale, right? And yeah, so the turtle and rabbit were competing, and obviously rabbit thought that he will easily win the race, but then obviously he didn't prepare, and he kind of fallen asleep in the middle of the race, and the turtle actually trained and just steadily was proceeding, never stopped, and actually won the race in the end. So yeah, really cool. Yeah, and really cool tradition. And it just kind of reminded me that probably on the current sort of regulations you wouldn't be able to wear something like that, but I don't know, maybe something smaller would be possible, because currently I think we have a lot of problems with like how much everyone weighs. Yeah, but it was cool to have that type of freedom back in the day, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. Maybe it's regarding a fire accident because it's metal and could get quite hot. So I may assume today it wouldn't be allowed, even if on the other hand, I think Sebastian Vettel always had a coin by his grandmother in his left or right shoe. But a coin is, of course, smaller than a turtle.
Well,
like
but
this.
there are other things, how people would have done it now. Probably they would put a turtle on the helmet somewhere or something like this, know. So there's like painted, you can paint stuff these days. So, and as drivers have a lot of freedom with the helmets, then definitely, there would be one on the helmet. But anyway, let's talk about Tazio Nuvolari, and I'm gonna look up to Patrick here, because obviously, Patrick, you know more about generally about Italian drivers.
So as you said, Italian driver born November 16th, 1892, meaning born in the Kingdom of Italy, in Castel d'Ario in Italia. That's August 11, 1953. He drove for different teams, Alfa Romeo and Scuderia Ferrari, and this includes also driving for Alfa Romeo, while Scuderia Ferrari was the official Alfa Romeo racing team before they split up. And besides this, he also drove for Auto Union. And we will come back to this a little bit later, because at the time he drove for Alfa Romeo, technically the Mercedes and Auto Union have been driving on a different level. And of course, if you're the best driver, you want also drive the best car. He won the 1932 European Championship, which you may say was something similar like Formula One after the war.
Yeah, that's right. We had a little bit of a discussion about this when we talked about Enzo Ferrari, and we showed quite a lot of these races back then.
Right. Some quotes from Tazio for you. Afraid of dying in an accident, but you who will die in your bed, do you still have the courage to go to sleep in it in the evening? Quite interesting quote. As we said, he practically always drove 100%, which had a high risk that he would not survive it, even if he did. And quite ironically, Tazio Nuvolari died in bed.
Yeah, but we also kind of I think it's also we at one point we talked about it, but generally, when we did some research with Formula 4 drivers, we actually asked them about, like, you are taking a lot of risk and all that, but what we consider really risky, these guys just they talk about it as their job. They just say, it's my job. So they have quite a lot of they basically have really high tolerance for risk in their own domain, while in like in the real life they could be quite risk averse, but when they are in the car, many of them actually are quite risk taking, but it's simply because it's not because they don't understand that they're taking risk, but they just it's their job. They just treat it as their job.
Yeah, and also we may consider here in which times we are speaking about. He known World War I, World War II. So I'm sure friends, family of him died. So death was pretty much the normal for people in Europe at that time. So maybe this also produces a different mindset than Formula One driver today may have. Next quote, brakes. What are brakes for? Good question. Because especially related Tazio Nuvolari, because he was practically he was famous for drifting around the curves. So he was not braking before the curves, but still acceleration. which you could have done with the cars in that time. That's why he really practically never used the brakes while driving in the races. They say that you are a good administrator, but I realize that is not true. You should have made me reserve only the one-way ticket. When you leave for a race, you have to foresee the possibility of returning in a wooden trunk. So quite honest understanding.
Yeah, and
even though I'm sure he was optimistic not to die in the race.
Yeah, and also if we consider how many collisions we had in Formula One in the early years, that was definitely a reality.
Yeah. Some career steps, especially in 1932, which maybe had been his best year, where he won the champion. Important here, a championship. We are speaking about 3 races a year, so not 25, 24 like we have today, but only there had been Monza, Ryan Gray in France, and of course the Nürburgring. So this 3 races, 2 times won by Tazio Nuvolari with the Alfa Romeo P3, which you can see on the photo, and 1 time Rudolf Caracciola, despite its name, German driver. So this time, Tazio Nuvolari, I think the best driver in the best car. There had been no races between 33 and 34 to the war, so he couldn't defend his title. And we always like to recommend reading books, reading biographies, but if you have the possibility, go also to the museums, the big ones like the Alfa Romeo Historic Museum in Milan, where you see all the cars, including, of course, the P3, but also, and we will come to this later today, visit the small museums, small private museums, dedicated to one particular driver. Always nice to see these places.
Yeah, indeed, and yeah, so obviously it's always better to see everything with your own eyes and have a better understanding of what was going on, and especially in terms of driving, because it was not easy thing to drive back then. And we also not just because of the way the cars were made, but also because we didn't have professional teams like we discussed with Patrick when we talked about 1950s. So you can go back and watch those episodes. And we explained then that when you were driving, you normally owned the car. So and that's why you only had 3 or 4 events a year, because you need to get your own car there and then race. So it was not an easy thing to do. You didn't have a huge team around you. Normally it was just a couple of people who actually ran the whole quote unquote team back in the day.
Yeah. Right. So Nuvolari, he started with motorcycling, which was quite common. We had a lot of Formula One drivers who started with motorcycles and then switched to 4 wheels. So quite normal. Interesting. Quite late. He started in the age of 27. Which today is nearly an age where you already retire in Formula One, to be a little bit provoking. So he started quite late. So so between 25 and the 1930, he drove motorcycles and cars, but then concentrated on cars and won the 1932 European Championship with the Alfa Romeo factory team called Alfa Corso. After this, Alfa Romeo officially withdrew from Grand Prix, and Tazio Nuvolari drove for the Scuderia Ferrari, which used mostly Alfa Romeo cars. A quite fun fact, Scuderia Ferrari also included some very few motorcycles, and also one driver used, I think, an American car, maybe a Packard. Because it was quite interesting, Enzo Ferrari organized his team, as you explained. You have to bring your private car, and they help to manage to the logistics, etc. But you joined the Scuderia Ferrari, bringing in your private car, and that's why they also extended it at some point to motorcycles, etc. And so. And then after he went to Maserati, and then Mussolini personally persuaded Enzo Ferrari to take Nuvolari back for 1935. You have to understand here, of course, that we saw the different dictatorships in Europe at that time. Even if Enzo Ferrari was not political, he was not supporting Mussolini, and on the other hand, he was also not supporting the left.
The resistance
after the war. The resistance. It's not quite clear. Some say he might have non-officially supported the resistance, which you can find in some biographies. Others not mentioning this, so we don't know. So anyway, Enzo Ferrari, even if he was not supporting Mussolini, he couldn't really decline what the leader was telling you. And due to this, we come to a very political race, 1935 season. At that time, you have to note that the Alfa Romeo P3 was very outdated, and especially the German competitors like Auto Union and Mercedes-Benz, they had been really much advanced, not only focusing on the motor, but also using advanced aerodynamics. So normally there was no way to win a race with the Alfa Romeo against Auto Union or Mercedes-Benz. Nevertheless, and the topic which we discussed at various times, we had been at the Nürburgring, maybe the most complicated race track, more than 20 kilometers long, and especially in the rain, very dangerous place. And 1935, we had the situation that it was raining, and in the rain, Tazio Nuvolari was already behind, especially as he had to do one stop more at the pits due to a technical problem. So he was much behind, but nevertheless, in one lap, 20 kilometers, the last lap, he could overtake the leading Mercedes driver, and everybody, the spectators, which included high-level political leaders, already wanted to celebrate the Mercedes victory, but then came this little red car with Tazio Nuvolari first, and people said this was the impossible victory because Tazio Nuvolari was driving 100% at the limit for the all, I don't know, 2 hours of the race. So this, in short, is the story of the impossible victory. Then his death, as already mentioned, not in an accident, and he formally never announced his retirement, but his health deteriorated, and he had a stroke in 1952, which left him partially paralyzed, and then he died in bed a year later, caused by a second stroke. At his funeral had been 25,000 until 55,000, we don't know anymore, which is at least half population of his hometown Mantua, attending the mile-long procession, while the coffin was placed on a car chassis that was pushed by famous drivers of that time, Alberto Ascari, Luigi Villarossi, and of course Juan Manuel Fangio.
So have you been to his museum in Mantua or?
Yeah, that I just wanted to mention. Unfortunately, I never had been to Mantua or his museum, but if you have the chance, there is this statue, as of course he's the most famous son of the city. And I don't know how is his museum. You can check it out on the webpage. But in general, my recommendation, always great to see this, also these small museums.
All right, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah. Last slide about Tazio before we come to Gilles. Regarding his legacy, as I said, for many, he's still one of the most talented drivers of all time. Some car manufacturers had been inspired to do some special one-offs with his name, like the Sicistalia Nuvolari Spider, or of course the Alfa Romeo Nuvola, which you can see in the mentioned Alfa Romeo Museum. Audi, as he was driving for Auto Union, which is as Audi was called before the end of the war. So they have the Audi Nuvolari Quattro, and Maserati honors him with a special color, the Grigio Nuvolari.
Okay.
As said, Nuvolari was an early exponent of the four-wheel drive, which was later utilized by drivers like Stirling Moss, also Ronnie Peterson, and of course, Gilles Villeneuve. If you're having a Spotify, check out our playlist. There we have also included a song by Italian singer-songwriter Lucio Dalla, with lyrics by Italian poet Roberto Rovessi. And that's all. Oh, sorry, with Tazio for the moment, and we really come to Gilles Villeneuve, the person which Enzo Ferrari compared Nuvolari with. Complete name, Joseph Gilles Henry Villeneuve, or also known as Gilles Villeneuve, Canadian, as I said, coming from the French part of the country, most famously known, of course, from his time at Ferrari. Born 18th January 1950 in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, Quebec, maybe 30 minutes north from Montreal, on the highway from Montreal to Quebec City. So if you are as a tourist in this area, you practically come automatically passing by if you're going from Montreal to Quebec City, and maybe a good idea to make 1 hour stop there to visit the small private Gilles Villeneuve Museum. He died in 82 in Leuven in the hospital after the accident in Zolder.
Yeah, and we will come to that as well. Like
yes.
We have obviously a regular episode that we have done on 1982 where we talked about it, but we will definitely talk about it again.
Yeah. So personal life, he was born to a piano tuner called Gilles Villeneuve and his wife Georgette, as I said, in the French part of Canada in Brazzaville. He married quite early to Jean Bass, with whom he had 2 children. First, Melanie, which is daughter, Melanie, and maybe more famous, Jacques, who became also Formula One driver and then reached what Gilles unfortunately couldn't. He became Formula One champion. Also, he has a third child, Jessica, but this with a different mother. And also there had been rumors that in the year he died, he was considering getting a divorce. In fact, there are some interesting interviews with Jacques Villeneuve, who mentioned that he didn't saw Gilles that often. So that's why he doesn't have many memories of his father. even if his driving style and his attitude, I think, very similar to Gilles.
Mm-hmm. So some genetic memory, but not so much emotional involvement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, he have learned about his father, I mean, from TV, so he could follow him on TV, even if he not had that many personal contact with him, or not as much as he would have liked to. So maybe, who knows, it's, yeah, I would assume some point genetically, but maybe this is what he saw from his father, maybe not in person, but maybe on TV, in interviews, racing, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and the famous controversy with the date of birth. Yeah, this is an interesting one.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
he made himself.
Yeah, he took off 2 years, right, of his actual date of birth.
Yeah, so something which we sometimes saw, for example, with singers, especially pop stars, as they should, as their publicum, the audience is young. Sometimes singers also take some years off to perceive a little bit younger, and he did it because normally 27 is too old entering in Formula One. Normally, remember, 27, the age when Tazio Nuvolari started with racing in general, with motorcycle, and 27 also, of course, the number which Gilles Villeneuve made famous in Formula One, and we come to this a little bit later.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We discussed it in other episodes. You come either from a rich family, and then you can buy your way through the different championships and to come up to Formula One, or if not, you have to see how you make it. Maybe you are working as a mechanic, or you have to see how to collect the money. Gilles Villeneuve said his father was a piano tuner. Interesting job, very artistic, but unfortunately, mostly didn't bring in too much money. So Gilles had to see how he can get to an income. And he started interesting, well, in general, if you consider that he's Canadian, not that strange, this snowmobile racing, which is there quite popular, which and for example, he won also the 1974 World Championship Snowmobile Derby. And this may be also something which he used for his driving style, because also similar as the drifting style from Tazio Nuvolari, you also drift normally with the snowmobiles quite fast through the curves, something which he used later also in Formula One. And the team whom he was driving in the snowmobile races, Kiol, also became one of his sponsors for motor racing. And for example, what Gilles said about them, every winter you would reckon on 3 or 4 big spills, and I'm talking about being thrown onto the ice at 100 miles per hour. Those things used to slide a lot, which taught me a great deal about control, and the visibility was terrible. Unless you were leading, you couldn't see anything with all the snow blowing about. Good for directions, and it stopped me having any worries about racing in the rain.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say that I don't think we have discussed someone who learned on snowmobile before. I think we discussed mostly people who were racing in motorcycle racing, bike racing, before going into Formula One racing, or generally car racing. And we discussed quite a few people who raced in karting. But yeah, I was gonna say that there's probably quite cool because the visibility must be non-existent in snowmobile. And yes, it's also slippery, and I guess it teaches you a lot about how to control a car in those conditions.
Exactly, and controlling the drifting, which maybe you not learn that much. I mean, you have the drifting still in the kart, but in Formula 2, Formula 3, you try not to drift because normally you lose speed with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now we jump to 1977 and Formula One. Before coming officially to Formula One, he drove in some of the non-official Formula One races. For example, participating in the Formula Atlantic, which includes cars quite near the Formula One reglement. And here he had some races where also participated the official F1 drivers. And here he bet the McLaren star James Hunt. And due to this, Hunt was quite impressed and helped him to get foot in the door at McLaren, which offered him a ride for one of the races where he qualified ninth at the British GP on the old M23. And here even had been between the two normal drivers, James Hunt and Jochen Maas, who both drove the newer M26. In the race, he set fifth fastest lap in this old car and finished 11th after being delayed for 2 laps by a faulty temperature gauge. So he was quite impressive driving a Formula One car the first time. So something which you may compare, I remember, to Michael Schumacher, who the first time sat in this quite relatively small Jordan, but really impressed everybody. So this is something, as we may imagine it here. Nevertheless, these results, the McLaren management,
they dropped him.
not offered him a contract because he thought he's fast, but causing too much accidents and meaning too expensive, and that's why he preferred Patrick Tambay, offering him the seat for the 1978 season.
Right. Big mistake.
Big mistake, yes.
Big mistake. And, McLaren.
Big mistake, yeah, big mistake. And Gilles Villeneuve, besides driving one time at McLaren in Formula One, he was also active in the Can-Am series for the Walter Wolf team. And he drove, as you see on the right, this Wolf Dallara WD1. Quite fast car, but very unreliable. So not many positive results. Nevertheless, impressive car. And speaking about museums, this car you see in the Gilles Villeneuve Museum around 30 minutes from Montreal.
Did it have the Canadian flag on it, like it is? Like, was it in racing, or was it just a museum sort of edition of the flag? I've never seen a flag before on a car. It looks interesting.
Yeah, honestly, I would have to compare it with photos from the races. I could imagine that it was also in the races because the Walter Wolf team, besides that Walter Wolf is an Austrian, and if you're curious, we have a special episode about him, but he immigrated to Canada, so this is a Canadian team, not only a Canadian driver. So they may have used the Canadian flag also inside the races.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so as we mentioned, Gilles Villeneuve, no real options for 1978 from McLaren. Nevertheless, he was already in touch with Walter Wolf, who also had the Formula One team. So maybe he could have started for them. Nevertheless, he had also already contacts with the Ferrari team, because Enzo Ferrari may have seen him on TV, and as he reminded him to Tazio Nuvolari, they invited him, and so he
yeah, this is
signed
where
for
this is what we talked about when we talked about luck. This is where luck comes in, right?
Yeah. So, and here a quote by Enzo: "When they presented me with this piccolo canadense, this minusculous bundle of nerves, I immediately recognized in him the physique of Nuvolari and said to myself, let's give him a try." Due to the rumor, he wasn't that fast while doing the testings on the Ferrari Fiorano test track, including doing some tracks, but for whatever reason, Enzo Ferrari, since the beginning, felt a quite emotional connection with him, maybe because he remembered him to his friend Tazio Nuvolari. And quite strange, normally he said, I'm suffering if I see what the drivers are doing with my car, bringing them on the limit, causing accidents. But on the other hand, this is what he also said. This is why he liked Villeneuve so much, is he saw he was a real driver, don't care about any
risk
kind
taker.
of strategy. Right, don't care about strategies, don't care about politics, just be inside the car, drive 100% all the time. And this is why he really liked him, even if he wasn't that successful right in the beginning. And on the other hand, Villeneuve said, if somebody said to me that you have 3 wishes, my first would have been to get into racing, my second to be in Formula One, and the third driving for Ferrari, something which many others said.
Yeah, I think this is probably the dream of every driver.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure not all drivers, but yeah, many, let's just say.
Yeah.
I think no sane driver would say no if they had an offer from Ferrari.
No, I remember that Michael Schumacher, he always said he never had the dream to Ferrari, and before he joined them, so it was more for other reasons, but he didn't have this emotional idea that at some stage I wanted to drive for Ferrari, what of course changed completely as he drove for the team.
Yeah, but he probably also contributed to many drivers after him wanting to drive for Ferrari.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So now 1978, and Gilles Villeneuve driving for Ferrari, but not really that successful, which not always had been his fault. Of course, some point could be the Michelin tires, which wasn't that competitive. And as you know, Italian press, they already started to writing him out of the team. So he was not the favorite of the Italians as he is now in day, but in the beginning, as he not delivered the results right from the beginning, the first newspapers already said he's not the right person to drive for Ferrari. Something which, by the way, also happened to Michael Schumacher in the first time, that they thought this was a big error having him inside the team. Nevertheless, Enzo Ferrari also, as he never had the best relation to Italian newspapers, he stayed with Villeneuve, and over the time, also already 1978, his results became better and better.
Yeah, and when we talked about Lotus team, and when we talked about Chapman, we were talking about the fact that Lotus kind of dominated late 70s, and Ferrari didn't have a good run then. Well, not as good as before, but nevertheless, Villeneuve won against Lotus. As we know, Lotus was fast, but notoriously unreliable. So when Lotus had an issue, then Gilles Villeneuve actually took advantage of it and scored a win for Ferrari, which was great. And this was in was it in the States, right? It was on the kind of one of the.
Well, yeah, he had his first victory in Montreal. With this, he's the only Canadian driver winning the Canadian Grand Prix up to
Very
today.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, remember we had one Canadian Formula One champion, but Jacques Villeneuve not won his home Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
In 1979, he has been now matched with South African driver Jody Scheckter.
Mm-hmm.
1979, very good year for the Scuderia. They had a competitive car. We had been now in the beginning of the ground effect cars. But Ferrari stayed with a more conventional approach, also because their big 12-cylinder engine couldn't fit in a more aerodynamic car. But for 1979, this was perfect. Ferrari won the championship for manufacturers, and Jody Scheckter won the championship, even if Gilles Villeneuve led in the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And a quite interesting character of Gilles Villeneuve is, and we saw this also in other pairings, even if he was a driver who didn't care about strategy, politics, whatever, just straight drove at the limit, he normally went by quite good with his team members, and even without problems followed team strategies as, for example, in this case, supporting Jody Scheckter and not maybe overtake him or fight him. So he was a good second driver in the moment, as Jody Scheckter was in the better position to win the title. So he was a very good team player.
Right.
And,
so and then of course we can talk about the French Grand Prix, right?
Yes.
Where we had a collision with Arnaud.
Yeah, with Arnaud, well, we didn't have the collision. If I'm not, I mean, this is some of the duels which up to today still in famous, being maybe the best duel which we saw in all the times in Formula One, as for various times Gilles Villeneuve and his friend René Arnoux had been fighting about the second position. So it wasn't about winning the Grand Prix, but about being the second position. So it was for various laps, both changing positions, driving wheel on wheel.
Well, they did touch, definitely. Like if you watched
they touched. Correct.
Well, they almost caused the collision. Let's just say
they almost caused the collision, but they didn't. And at the end, Gilles Villeneuve got the second position. René Arnoux the third. And there are some quite good interviews from René Arnoux where he remembered this situation, and quite interesting, because after the race, everybody was only speaking about in this duel, and unfortunately nobody spoke about the other Renault driver who scored, I think, the first victory for the Renault team. So for him doing the first victory, but nobody speaking about him. And Villeneuve commented here, quote, "I tell you, that was really fun. I thought for sure we were going to get on our heads, because when you start interlocking wheels, it's very easy for one car to climb over another. But it didn't. It worked out fine. And you have to know here that both have been friends. So René Arnoux remembered, for example, that over the weekends he invited Gilles Villeneuve to eat with him in the Renault box, and the other day Gilles Villeneuve invited René Arnoux to eat at the Ferrari team. I think something which we couldn't think that it would happen today again. So they really respected each other, and they really have been friends. There, by the way, there are a lot of short videos which you can find about the 1979 season on YouTube. Maybe not all that officially, but who knows? So this duel you can find on the internet. The other point is where Gilles Villeneuve had a puncture on his tire and was practically driving one lap on three wheels. You also see a lot of photos about this. You may see the video. Another example, as he was somebody who practically never gave up, and maybe even sometimes in situation where, from a logical point of view, you should have parked the car beside the racetrack, because even if you made it slowly to the box, you have ruined the whole car with the driving one lap with just three wheels. So from a logical point, there was no real reason why you still had been pushing after such a situation. But this is how Gilles was, and this is why the fans love him up to today.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also kind of coming back to the team orders, kind of brought up all this, it kind of brought up all this controversy with the team orders and someone not following the team orders, right? So he wasn't really doing that.
Yeah. Okay, 1980, a year which we don't have to talk about that long, at least not from Gilles Villeneuve or Ferrari point, because as I said, it was a time when the ground effect cars had been introduced, and in 1980 with a flat 12 engine, it wasn't possible to win or even get good results. Right. There have been even some races where Jody Scheckter, as the reigning champion, not qualified for the race. So at that level, the problems had been in 1980 at Ferrari. But they bounced back, and already in 1981 presented the first turbocharged F1 car. Also new team colleague for Gilles Villeneuve, French Didi Pironi, joined the car, and he noted that Villeneuve had a little family, because he was very well connected at the Ferrari team. As I said, he had this great connection even up to Enzo Ferrari. But nevertheless, Villeneuve made him welcome and made me feel at home overnight. So he was a very friendly character outside the racetrack.
And here we come to an interesting, very interesting fact that now McLaren had second thoughts about Gilles Villeneuve, and they decided, this guy has been driving for Ferrari, and Ferrari is not doing too well. I mean, they're improving, but not doing too well. So, let's invite this guy back. And he rejected.
He rejected, and let's say from a logic, apart from the emotional point, staying at Ferrari, I mean, even from a logical point, we saw that, of course, it was a tragic year for Ferrari and Villeneuve because of his fatal accident. But let's say if this would not have occurred, the 1982 Ferrari was the fastest car. And that's the reason why, for example, they still won the manufacturers' championship in 1982, besides the fatal accident from Villeneuve and the accident by Pironi. But so it was the strongest car, even, of course, it would have most likely be better if he wouldn't have sat inside the car in 82.
Yeah, but I mean, this also kind of shows that, sometimes you make a mistake and you're trying to get the driver back, but they just don't. Yeah, and who can blame him? I mean, obviously.
Yeah, of course. So we are now 1982. We are speaking about the Imola Grand Prix, and here we had the quite unfamous situation that between Villeneuve and Pironi. Villeneuve was leading the Grand Prix, Pironi second. They got the sign from the Ferrari pit saying stay. And Villeneuve, nevertheless, Pironi overtook Villeneuve, and Villeneuve at that moment was thinking that Pironi was only doing this for the Tifosi. Imola is the San Marino Grand Prix, is the San Marino Grand Prix, but Imola, not, of course, is inside Italy. So Villeneuve thought that he did this just for the fans to have some show. Then Villeneuve overtook Pironi again, and then again slowed down because he got the signs from the box. But then in the last lap, Pironi overtook him again, despite the signals from the box that he should have stayed behind. And Pironi won the race, Villeneuve second. And of course, Villeneuve very, very angry, saying, I think it was well known that if I want someone to stay behind me and I'm faster, then he stays behind me. And he feels betrayed because he saw that the Ferrari team was giving these signals, and Pironi did not respect him. Pironi said that he didn't know because in his old team, stay means stay longer, stay out, whatever. But let's say there have been also interviews with other Ferrari responsibles. I think it was Mauro Fogheri, the engineer, who said that Pironi clearly had known what the signals meant and that he took the decision to disrespect.
Of course he did, but I was just, I also want to say that, I mean, this is a little bit of a cheeky situation because we know that Villeneuve himself didn't respect the team orders, but then like he expected, and in this particular case, the orders to be respected, but in other situations we saw that he was kind of staying competitive until the end. So, yeah.
Yeah, one reason why Villeneuve maybe felt betrayed because, let's say, he was in 1979 the team player who supported Jody Scheckter winning the championship. And he saw, of course, that 1982 was the year where the Ferrari was the fastest car. So, and you never know how next year is the situation. So if you know you're sitting in the fastest car, this is your opportunity, and you don't know if this opportunity comes again. Another reason why, of course, he felt betrayed in that situation.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And he never spoke to Pironi, right? After that.
Yes, he never spoke with him again in his life.
Yeah, I also kind of
that long after that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so before we come to Zolder, the Long Beach Grand Prix, we did a special episode about the politics in Formula One at that time, the different disputes, who against whom, etc. So here just today the short version. Ferrari presented for the US Grand Prix in Long Beach a special version of the car with where they thought they identified a loophole as they presented, as you can see, two separated
wings,
back wings.
Back wings, yeah.
which together not had been larger than the allowed weight, but FIA said it was not allowed to do two separate instead of just one big, and that's why later he was disqualified.
Yeah, so
if
he
I'm
came
correct,
third, right? He came
yes,
third on that race, but the results did not count, which was frustrating.
that's correct.
I can imagine.
Yes, this was, and I'm not completely sure if I'm correct. It was just the Gilles Villeneuve car who had this wing. I'm not completely sure, but I think Pironi had a more conventional back wing in that race.
Yeah, I don't
Okay,
remember,
and with,
to be fair.
yeah, and with this, unfortunately, we have to come to Zolder, and here Gilles Villeneuve tragically died in a training accident inside the qualifying session, and there are a lot of discussions around this. At this point, Didier Pironi set time 0.1 seconds faster than himself, and Villeneuve only on the 6th place. And after this, Gilles Villeneuve told the crew to put on tires and to go out again, and trying to be faster, he collided with Jochen Maas, and then we will see this in the next photo. And honestly, there are also a lot of video clips which show this accident.
Yeah.
And had his fatal accident. So based on this background with Pironi, many interpreted that this led to this fatal accident because he was angry and due to this, under all circumstances, wanted to be faster than Pironi. So a lot of experts have this opinion. On the other hand, if you see Villeneuve's career in Formula One, as discussed, he was always trying 100%. And he had many
Near misses. Many near misses.
Yeah, near misses. Let's say he had misses in the point. He had many spectacular accidents. But even though if with a little bit less loss, you would have survived such spectacular accidents in Villeneuve did, and mostly without any injuries. So it was not the first time that he drove on the limit and had a spectacular accident like this, but in the opposite to the last times, this time he not survived it. So it's not that this was the first big accident which he had due to his driving style, always at the limit. So and due to this, I like to say that I not want to fault here this situation which we had with Pironi as a direct motivator leading to this accident. Even if, for example, Alan Prost said that it was clearly to see that due to the competition with Pironi, this would have no good end for Villeneuve.
Yep. And I just, I never thought about it this way, but it just came to me. I mean, obviously, we will talk about number 27. But there is the so-called 27th club, right, of people who died at 27, and I mean, I know that Gilles Villeneuve was 32 when he died, but I mean, kind of the number is also quite significant, even if it's just like obviously it's a coincidence, but yeah,
right.
Yeah. So this footage actually you can find online. And we just just showing.
Yeah, and if you want to read the video, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube or other sources. For example, when you are at the Gilles Villeneuve Museum, they're also showing this accident, and it's really impressive to see, because if you see how he flies up to the air after touching the car from Jochen Mass. He's I don't know how long he is in the air. You perceive it as a very long time, and for a very long time you see him flying and practically thinking he will not survive it. So you can see practically all the seconds before you think must be his death. So it's quite impressive to see.
Yeah, it's obvious that no one could have walked out of that car.
Yeah. Mentioning Jochen Mass, and here we described a little bit how it happened. So Jochen Mass saw Villeneuve approaching at high speed and moved to the right, as you normally do in such a situation. At the same instant, Villeneuve also already decided moving right to pass him. And due to this, the Ferrari hit the back of the march and was launched at air at a speed around 225 kilometers. And I think if you see this description, this is clear that's not Jochen Maas's fault. Nevertheless, Maas had a similar, had a complete different, but he had another impressive accident that year. So that's why I think this was practically another what triggered for him to retire after that year.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, here we have a little bit an overview about his the cars he drove. Again, he started with the outdated M23 McLaren, but then directly switched to Ferrari. So practically his whole Formula One career, he was, as we remember him, a Ferrari driver.
Mm-hmm. And he did have a chance to go back to McLaren, but obviously he didn't want to do that.
Yeah, and again, it made sense from an emotional point, but also the 82 Ferrari was the fastest car on the track.
Yeah, the famous helmet.
Yeah, before I come to the helmet, I forgot to mention, and ironically, after you see, he died in Imola, so relatively in the beginning of 1978. I'm sorry, 82, and
82.
82, and quite ironically, somebody to replace him for the next season for 83 would be his friend René Arnoux. Even if Arnoux not directly replaced Villeneuve, because his seat later in the season was given to Patrick Tambay, who didn't, for whatever reason, didn't had a seat for the 82 season.
Yeah,
so the one
he died.
Him at McLaren.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that he died on the 8th of May, and obviously that's just right at the beginning of the season, which normally starts in March. So, yeah.
So correctly. So later, his seat was taken by Patrick Tambay, who got the McLaren seat instead of Villeneuve. And Pironi also had an accident, not fatal, but he broke 2 legs and he would never return to Formula One. And quite interesting story. Pironi died some years later in motorboat racing, powerboat racing, while his girlfriend have been pregnant with twins, and she decided to name them Didier and Gilles. Okay, but now coming back to the helmet.
Yeah. So, but it's just quite a functional helmet, but very iconic one, and it's red and black, and just very, very tasteful.
Yeah, and
but the helmet survived, or is it just I'm just wondering, is that the helmet? Do you know?
I mean, a good question. I would assume that there isn't this one helmet, but they have a number of
yeah,
helmet. I mean, this helmet looks used, but honestly,
yeah, it looks like it's been in some accidents at least. Yeah.
Yes, and as you mentioned it, there's another short point which was mentioning after the accident. I mean, Gilles Villeneuve was still alive. He was brought to the hospital, and Didier Pironi, it was said, is that he walked by and took Villeneuve's helmet and was walking with his helmet and Gilles Villeneuve's helmet back to the Ferrari box. So disregarding the helmet was still there, but honestly, I cannot imagine that this is the helmet from the fatal accident, but another one he used over the time. Something what his son Jacques explained, Gilles Villeneuve designed himself the colors, the design, and at that time it was not as today that practically for each race your personal designer designs your helmet for the race, but this was like a signature, meaning you had your whole career using the same helmet design.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, even now the drivers have like freedom, right? Some freedom with colors and things like this.
Yeah, today they have the freedom, and I think more or less, I think they limit it a little bit, but you change the design from each race to race. And a lot of them, they know some artists, so they not did it himself using the famous Crayola pencils, at least famous here in the US, Mexico, Canada. I don't know if they are in other places of the world, but
yes,
here it's the most famous brand. So he used his Crayolas and designed it himself. So it's a quite, say, simple, but I think stylish design, quite 80s.
Yeah, very tasteful.
Using these colors. Yeah. And with this, we're coming to the quotes. It is true that the life of a human being is like a movie. I had the privilege of being the appearance, the screenwriter, the protagonist, and the director of my way of life. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Apart from maybe obviously the fatal collision he had. Yeah.
Yes. I will drive flat out all the time. I love racing. That's what we discussed. Last on this page, I race to win, you can tell. But even before winning, I race to race as quick as I can. And that's why, for example, explaining his behavior as taking the Formula One car on 3 wheels back to the box because he loves race for racing, even from a logical point. Maybe somebody as Niki Lauda, Alain Prost would just have parked the car on the left, on the right, because there was no real sense bringing the car back, especially if you're just thinking of getting points. If you search for the limit in the meantime, you have to go over it. And of course, this applied to him. He had various accidents because he was over the limit. And unfortunately, the last one was fatal.
Yep.
Monte Carlo is a mountain circuit with a city around it.
I couldn't agree more. That's what I think too. It's just.
I mean, yeah, you had the opportunity to be in Monte Carlo.
Yeah, it's just brutal, and but I also know that some people just sort of bored with Monte Carlo, and I don't understand how you could possibly be bored because it's really such an exciting circuit.
Yeah. We should approach the turns shifting to a lower gear than the one we use now and put the car crosswise. The people are still in love with how Ronnie Peterson was driving his Lotus 72, and I understand them. I agree with them. This is the kind of entertainment I want to give the crowd, smoking tires. So, so Ronnie Peterson was a little bit his inspiration.
I think it's just. I think he's talking about more like about the kind of that this is a show business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all understand that sport is a show business, but I think Gilles Villeneuve really understood it, and a lot of this risk-taking behavior was. I mean, I don't mean for the show in the bad sense, but meaning that to give the value to the fans, right? So that's what it was all about. Yeah.
Of course. And speaking about smoking tires, another short story regarding Gilles Villeneuve. He was said to have invented putting a grip with smoking tires on his starting position to be able to have more grip, meaning in the lap before leaving the pit on the race Sunday before the race starts. He passed by the position where he started, practically stopped, and then accelerated with smoking tires with the idea to put some grip on the track. And then when the race started, to have a small advantage there. Okay, you cannot take your foot off the accelerator while you are racing fast. The only hope is that the other driver is looking at you in the rear view mirror. And I think quite tragically, because the other driver was doing this, Jochen Maas, that's caused the fatal accident, because Jochen Maas was looking in the back mirror and did what you normally do, to drive to the right. And Villeneuve, for whatever reason, had the idea to pass Maas on the right, what you normally wouldn't do. I mean, this caused the fatal accident. Let's say if Jochen Maas would not have looked in the rear mirror, maybe this accident never happened. Of course, pure speculation.
Yeah. Well.
Okay. Legacy, quite interesting, because even if this happened now his death is more than 40 years ago, I think he's still one of the most well-known and also a beloved driver. As mentioned in the beginning, if you have the opportunity, always go to the museum, and not only to the big Ferrari museums, but also these small museums are very interesting, and the small private museum organized by fans, and really interesting. For more than 30 years, there is this small museum. You see the photos, which I took, as I had the pleasure being in Montreal, not at the races, but at least in the city. So, and if you're driving from Montreal to Quebec, as mentioned, you automatically pass by the museum. So we did a stop there. And you see here some of the cars, like the black Can-Am car, his racing overall. You see here the top of the car, not a complete Ferrari car most of the times, but at least the top from the 82 Ferrari. So really, if you have the opportunity, see this place. And this applies, I think, for all small racing museums.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Brilliant. You already mentioned the 27, even if he not used it for that many years. I think only for 2 seasons, 81, 82. After this, this has been practically always somehow emotionally related to Gilles Villeneuve. So in '83, it was used by Patrick Tambay. Yep. After this, by Michele Alboreto, also a beloved Ferrari driver. Then later, Ayrton Senna, quite interesting, used it for 1990. And by the way, at that time, the drivers hadn't been free to choose their numbers.
Yes.
It went from Ferrari to McLaren because in '89 Alain Prost won with the McLaren the championship, and as he moved to 1990, Ferrari started with the 1 and 2, and McLaren got the 27, 28 from Ferrari. So Ayrton Senna could choose the maybe I want to be 27 and or 28, and normally as the number 1 driver, you choose the lower number for the team. Okay, and then after the '99 season, where the numbers went back to Ferrari, and now Alain Prost used the 27 in the beginning as he left early. And we will discuss it, of course, when we speak about Alain Prost or the '99 season. It went to the Italian driver Gianni Morbidelli. And after this, it went quite famously to Jean Alesi, who also had a very similar style than Gilles Villeneuve. So I think it was a quite fitting combination for him. And after this, 2014, Nico Hülkenberg used the number until 2022, where he has been the reserve driver for Aston Martin. Now we are recording this in the beginning of 1923. So I will, as Nico Hülkenberg will join the Haas team, I imagine we will have the 27 back in Formula One, and also interesting using at a Ferrari powered car.
Yep.
If you are into collecting model cars, a lot of the small Italian manufacturers not only offer the cars, but also they do some kind of dioramas. For example, in the middle, you see a diorama related to the famous duel René Arnoux and Gilles Villeneuve, as we discussed. On the left, you see the situation, Gilles Villeneuve on just 3 wheels. So, and there are a lot of different kind of dioramas, including one Gilles Villeneuve at a marketing event against, I think, a starfighter taking off. I don't know from which year. And from a different manufacturer, I found at a Belgium flea market, for example, one of such a model you see here on the figure, Gilles Villeneuve, with the company car, nice Ferrari 308. So a nice flea market found, because honestly, these models, as you see, most of them out of production, quite expensive.
That's right. Music. Yeah.
Music.
If you're watching this on Spotify, I guess there will be some links to this, right?
No, there's no direct link, but if you look fast data-driven F1 in Spotify, you get the link to the podcast, but also you get the link to a Spotify playlist. And here I included the mentioned song regarding Tazio Nuvolari in our playlist, but also the one from SIG, which is called Gilles Villeneuve. This song was also used in the last year's documentary called Le Aviator. Yes, it's a very good documentary. I had the opportunity to see it on the Rai Up. I don't know if it's still on the app, but if you are in Italy, you can download the app and see this for free if it's still there. This only if you are inside the Italian territory. I mean, if you're not in Italy, maybe you're using some...
You can VPN into it.
VPN? And maybe if you tell the VPN to connect to the Italian server, maybe it works to see it. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not too forbidden to do that. So, yeah, maybe it works. You can try it.
Yeah.
But really, a very good documentary. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, Gilles Villeneuve, the aviator, and you know that was his nickname, and that's a great film.
Great
documentary. As always, we encourage you. Yeah, as always, we encourage you to watch the documentaries and the footage of actual races.
Yeah. Okay, so nearly 90 minutes, and that's our episode on Gilles Villeneuve.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us. As usual, just a reminder, we exist in video format on YouTube and Spotify, on ever-growing list of other resources as a podcast. And thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.